Hey, and welcome to the latest Humpday Hangout. It is the first Wednesday of the month of August. Believe it or not, we're already in August. Time is flying by. And so we're back here to talk about training. And we missed you in July with our travel schedules, summer vacations, everything else going on. We weren't with you in July, but we're glad to have you back here in August. And before we get to today's topic, which we're going to be talking about thinking outside the box, when looking for and establishing training resources. We'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to just bring you a few updates. I'm actually on the road at the FDIC Fire Engineering Advisory Board meeting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So those of you that have been FDIC instructors or want to be an FDIC instructor, the grading is in progress. The meeting is going on as we speak downstairs, where they select the hot programs and the workshops as well as the classroom sessions. So that information should be coming out in the next few weeks from Penwell. Just keep in mind, for those of you who put in, everybody gets a rejection letter once in a while, even those of us that serve on the board. I've had a class turned down before, so don't get too upset, but well over 900 class presentations were submitted for or proposals, and they got to reduce that down to around 300, 400 classes. So there's a lot of people that will end up on the cutting room floor, but don't let that disappoint you. Keep putting in, keep writing articles is a great way to get your class accepted. If you write an article and then teach a class on that article or similar subject, that helps out a lot. So stay the course, and remember, FDIC is a little bit earlier this year in April 2019. So keep that in mind as you get ready for planning for FDIC. Because most of us here are active members or board members of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, I would like to mention that ISFSI has an annual fall conference, very instructor-driven, very instructor-focused on helping fire instructors be better fire instructors, and resources and tips, as well as a lot of great social activities and stuff like that. That conference is outside of Chicago. Forrest Reeder and his fire department in Tinley Park, Illinois, are going to be the hosts, and that's September 24th through the 29th. So still time to register for that conference. It's a little more than a month away at isfsi.org. And then as we do turn to our topic today, I would just like to mention, if you follow us on Twitter or you have a question, we'll be monitoring Twitter at #FE. So you put it #FE chat. We'll get that, and we will try to answer your questions on the show. So our topic this month was suggested by our friend from Florida, Steve Shaw, talking about thinking outside the box when you're trying to get resources for training. I think any of us that have been involved in training, whether we be a company officer, chief officer, or a training boss, is always looking for resources, and not just talking about books and videos and things like that, but where do you get cars? Where do you get acquired structures? Where do you get supplies and things like that? And a lot of us are dealing with very tight budgets and things like that. So that's our topic for today. We've got a host of information, and I think everybody on the panel's got some good experience with kind of outside the box resources that they've been able to acquire over the years. So Steve, I'll turn it to you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be back with you all again. I know we had a month off, but seeing you guys has been it's always a great thing to see you all. Yeah, when we were talking about this, or when I was thinking about this, I always think about the proverb, necessity is the mother of invention. And I know that each of our fire departments has, pros and cons. Everybody has resources, some don't. For us in Fort Lauderdale, for example, we have a great amount of resources when it comes to personnel and talent, besides having special ops teams and SWAT medics and a bunch of other programs that other departments may not have. But one thing that we never had, for example, in the past, in our 106-year history, was a training facility. One thing we don't have. So we're always looking for ways to do training within the city. So we can go to the fire academies, we can go to Broward Fire Academy or Hollywood or wherever, but it's always kind of forced us to look inside to say, what can we do? How do we develop something inside the city? And because of that, we have a phenomenal acquired structures training program, for example. We do more acquired structured training inside Fort Lauderdale and in the area than most cities do in our neck of the woods. It also comes down to what your needs assessment. Going back to that concept of necessity is the mother of invention. What are your needs? What are your particular needs? And for us in South Florida, we have a lot of hurricanes that come through. So with all the hurricanes that have come through the years, most of our construction here has gone away from wood frame construction and gone to CBS construction. But also we have a lot of structures with impact glass, reinforced overhead garage doors. And those kind of things are something that's specific to maybe not so much in others. So one of my favorite examples of this is a good public-private partnership that we made with a local garage door company. When I first came into training, my need was, we force a lot of these doors, can we get together and do you have any of these doors that you can loan us to cut? Long story short, with this relationship we built, they basically built us a prop that houses their old doors that they're throwing out. Essentially, their trash becomes our treasure. So on a regular basis, we'll send crews over there to cut up these reinforced sectional garage doors that in some cases have over 5 inches of reinforcement behind them. So the relationship we have is a constant flow of good, well, like I said, what is, in their case is trash. But for us, it's that opportunity to use our saw, go over rotary saw etiquette, practice our skills, hone everything. It's just become a phenomenal opportunity. And in fact, the prop they developed us, it's not a common thing. It's one of the things that a lot of the fire departments around our neck of the woods come to us to utilize to practice their skills. But it goes back to, had that need. Something wasn't there before. What are your needs, and kind of seeing, okay, what can we do to combat this? So that's one of my favorite examples, but it goes back to kind of something that I'm sure we'll talk about is the networking aspect as well. Someone, I don't know who it was, but someone a while back had said, Steve, one of the greatest things you can have is a great Rolodex, a great contact list. And that's what we've developed over the past few years, and we've really benefited from that. So not to take the stage too much, but that's kind of one of my favorite examples of that public-private partnership, and I'll definitely pass it along. I'd love to hear what you guys have done for out of the box thinking on these topics.
Awesome. So I will kick it all the way to Aaron, because I know Aaron's got a lot of background and experience, both with his training company, but also teaching at his county fire academy, being a career officer and a volunteer chief and everything like that. I know you've created some relationships over the years and got some resources. So Aaron, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that topic?
All right. Well, again, it's great being here this summer, and sorry we missed last month, but it's good to be back. That is the big thing. We get sometimes when we're out teaching, we don't realize that not everybody has the kind of resources that some of us have in bigger departments or in cities or places like that. Not everybody has a place like the Rock or the Chicago Fire Academy to go to. Not everybody has all the different props and everything we would want. So we really got to think outside the box, as this is about. One thing that I found where my station is, our firehouse is out really on the edge of town, basically. So we're not close enough to the academy that we can just go out of service for a little bit, and it creates issues if we do it. Not that we don't, but we don't do it as regularly as we would like to, as guys on the other side of town have a lot better way of doing it. So for us, we had to get more creative. One of the things is we tried to foster a good relationship with local junkyards. So where I work, we bring cars to us because we don't have a junkyard really close, but they charge us minimal to have them, basically what it costs their staff to bring them over and take them out, and that's it. Where I volunteered for years in New Egypt, they've got several junkyards in the area, a real good tow company in the area, and they just basically can call whenever they want, and they set it up. There's an area of the junkyard that everybody knows that's kind of where the fire departments train, and they do it for everybody. There's one right there that borders the joint base. So we have McGuire, Fort Dix, and Lakehurst Navy base as one big joint base fire department. A couple of weeks ago, I saw that all those guys were out at that junkyard, and then the New Egypt guys were out there a couple nights later. So just going out and talking to these folks, because they drive through the neighborhood, they want these guys to be proficient at extrication. So that was something. as Steve pointed to the garage doors, that's a big thing. When it came to our hot class at FDIC the last 2 years, we hauled out garage doors from Jersey. I can tell you, I am sitting in my fiance's house in Indy right now, and when I get done sometime this week, I'll be scouring garage door places until I go back home to make sure that I get them piled up again for out here. So maybe I won't have to drive them out. But just having those relationships. We just taught in Barry City, Vermont. Real cool little place, but a tiny training budget. And they built a roof prop because we were doing aerial operations and we were doing a lot of cutting and so forth. So they went out to their local lumber yard, made friends with the guy. I'm sure they were friends with him in the past, and it worked for them. So we worked for 4 days and 4 nights straight and had all the lumber we needed, and it was at a minimal cost to the fire department. So these are the types of things that you can go out, and there's so much stuff online now with people actually putting pictures of their props up. Some guys will actually give you their whole design for their prop. I can tell you the roof prop that we built it based off a design that we used down in Colleton County, South Carolina a couple of years ago. Actually, E.J. Mascaro had it built for us. So these are the things that we have to foster, because when the money's tight, we've got to find a way of doing it.
Awesome. So Brad or Tony, one of you want to chime in and talk to us about some of your metro-sized apartments and what you're doing?
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. One thing when we come back around, I'm also going to be curious from all the other panelists is about the concept of live fire. And when you're starting to talk about acquired structures and things like that, are you burning in these structures? Or are you just tearing them up and doing overhaul and vent holes in the roof and stuff like that? We don't do any acquired structure live fire in our city. We have a good fixed facility live fire training center where we do Class A fuels and stuff like that, but we don't burn. We do have an acquired structure program where we'll go out to some of our vacant properties and utilize it for training, but not actually for live fire. So I will be curious about that with everybody else. As far as we go, just to kind of change gears a little bit and look at it from another perspective, I worked a majority of my career thus far in and around our downtown and all the high-rise buildings in downtown Dayton. And one of the things that we have had good success with is in that realm of fire protection systems, sprinkler, standpipes, high rise, and things like that. Doing training events, working with building maintenance folks and property managers at some of our high rise buildings to really get our folks into those buildings. Not only from a pre-planning standpoint and really understanding where sprinkler control valves are and all that different kind of thing, and seeing the elevator mechanical rooms and seeing the fire pump rooms and stuff, but actually taking it to the point of doing some live water flow in our downtown buildings. We've done that on a couple occasions. We just ran a major training event when I was assigned to our training division for a while. We ran a major training event where we actually went and did standpipe hookups on the top floor of a 20-story high-rise and had our crews advancing lines and things like that through that top floor. And then once they got out onto kind of an open area on the top where they could do so safely and without causing any damage, actually doing some water flow. And it's very beneficial for some of our guys to feel what that standpipe stream felt like prior to the fire pump kicking in the basement of the building. And then what changes in stream quality and debris and things like that came through the system when that did go into place. So anyway, long story short, outside of just looking at this in terms of single family dwellings and acquired structures and doing smaller scale training that way with overhaul and ventilation and things like that, I would definitely encourage folks to go out, build those relationships with office buildings in your community and establish those personal relationships with the maintenance folks and things like that. So you have those contacts, you have those after hours numbers that you can give them a call if you're there for a fire alarm or something like that. And you've given your folks the opportunity to not only get in those buildings and learn them from a pre-planning perspective, but actually do, if the building will allow it, actually do some live water flow from their systems up on upper floors. And, provided that they allow you to do that, is a very beneficial experience. And it's something that we did just recently with a lot of success in our organization. And another thing along those lines of fire protection systems that I would encourage is having a really strong relationship with your prevention folks, as well as as well as the individual building owners. So your line personnel can go observe things like, for example, when when they're doing pre-occupancy inspections and checks and things like that of a new structure, if it has a big atrium, watching them fill it up with the fake smoke and using the smoke management system control panels and getting your truck companies out there to actually see that process as they do the final testing on some of those ventilation systems that are dedicated to smoke removal, or going to figuring out when the local contractors are doing the fire pump tests at the different buildings in your jurisdiction and seeing that and putting your eyes on it. So there's a lot to learn in terms of fire suppression systems, I think, in and around the industrial or commercial or downtown areas of your city that we've had a lot of success with.
So Brad,
I can tell you real quick. I mean, I was just looking before I came in here. Well, first, let me take this opportunity to say, maybe it's a coincidence, but since I got involved in this Google Hangout on training, I got assigned to the training academy. So I really appreciate your help, guys, and really a life-altering change. But besides that, before I came in today, we were going through our budget. This is kind of a line item thing here of the budget here in our DC Fire Department Training Academy. And I don't see a whole lot of, line items for training props and things like that. So we have to, we use a lot of stuff we have built on our training academy grounds, which makes it really tough. The city is not real big, but it's pretty busy. So to find time to carve out to get down here is tough. Any given day, we have 6 units out a day down here doing, modular EMS training. We have some guys going around to each firehouse to give them firefighting training in their firehouse, because again, it's going to be real tough to get down here. So the companies out there that are doing training have to get kind of creative in their area. Again, to get down to the academy can be pretty tough. So they're going to have to find a way to get some stuff done in their area. That's where they can make good connections with, building owners, building managers, and see if they can, maybe come there and run lines or operate off of their standpipe. Again, not with water, but at least stretching lines and getting that kind of idea. So, I mean, we do have, a training budget, and we have time and stuff like that, but because it's really busy down here for EMS and things like that, they have to kind of reach out and be creative in their area.
So Tony, you're welcome, first off, for making that life-altering change. I might have talked to your chief a little bit at a meeting somewhere, had dinner with him. And but Brad, I wanted to ask you a question, because obviously, if you're not familiar with Goshen, Ohio, we don't have any high rises. Our biggest buildings are our schools, but we're seeing growth, and we're seeing some buildings coming in that are going to change what we need to do to train, as far as fire protection systems and fire pumps and alternative water supplies and sprinkler systems and things that in our rural suburban setting we don't see every day. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you made those relationships in the city of Dayton? And also, were those vacant structures or were they actually occupied, and how did that relationship work so that you weren't interrupting the day-to-day? And not to throw too many things on you, but I've also heard concerns of using occupied buildings and standpipes. What happens if you damage it or water starts leaking on the 27th floor while you're flowing on the roof or stuff? So can you elaborate on that a little bit, Brad? Because I'm curious just for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our particular circumstance, we utilized the 20th floor, which for this particular high rise was the top floor, and it was a vacant floor. So we weren't dealing with interacting with a tenant on that particular floor. As far as the concerns about water damage and stuff like that, yeah, absolutely, it was a concern, and certainly something that I had to run. I was in the training division at the time and kind of spearheaded the project. Certainly something that I had to run up through our command staff to make sure that they were okay with from a liability standpoint, and that building maintenance supervisor that I was dealing with ran it all the way up through his chain of command. But I think as long as those involved realize that there's a significant benefit there, that there's a benefit to having that relationship with the fire department, and the fire department understanding the system, knowing the valves, knowing the building fairly intimately, I think on the end of the building manager, he was able to sell it to his folks that yes, there's a small amount of risk in them doing live water flow inside this occupied building, but at the same time, there's a lot of benefit there as well in the event that we do have something significant going on. So we were able to get the thumbs up to do that, and the building was occupied throughout the day. Not the particular floor we were using, which was the top floor, but it was absolutely occupied. Now, we did not pump the FDC. We just allowed the building fire pump to kick in once the pressure dropped to the appropriate threshold, and then and up on the roof, the guys are flowing the line, and they can suddenly feel the feel the surge in the system and all that kind of stuff, and the water get a little bit junkier as that higher pressure starts to rumble loose some of the debris and the built up stuff in the risers over the years. And so it was very beneficial. As far as how to make those connections and things like that when you're first starting out, getting some of those things into your jurisdiction. In my case, in a larger city environment, we have a full-time prevention bureau, right? Several folks that do that, and so they're working with the plans review and all that kind of stuff, and they see these things coming on their radar, and they're able to communicate those to us. In a smaller environment, I would imagine, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, probably a lot of those things go through your office. Or the office of one of your immediate subordinates in a smaller environment like that, to know that this test is coming up, or this building is getting ready for its final occupancy inspection or something. And the earlier the earlier you can get your folks involved in getting their eyes on that stuff, the more that they'll understand the system. If they can get there early on during the construction process, when they're actually running the piping and stuff like that, maybe go chat up the sprinkler contractor that's running the lines and stuff like that, and really see the building when it's still kind of in skeleton form as they're putting all that stuff in, then they're going to understand it at that level more so than just walking in and, okay, they got an FDC on the side of the building and they've got this riser in the stairs and that's all they know. When you get involved earlier on, you see the pump test that's done, you see all the cross mains and branch lines running above the drop ceiling and stuff, and they have a better understanding of it the earlier you get them involved in that process. And really this speaks to the whole outside the box training thing, because just getting out into your district is a huge outside the box thing, right? Just like Chief Carroll was saying, doesn't have the opportunity due to run volume issues with bringing people to the training division on a regular basis, and they've got to kind of home grow it a little bit. And the best way to home grow your training is to really intimately learn your district and to get out into those buildings ahead of time and talk to those folks and run some dry lines and things like that. So yeah, I guess my answer to your question would be, the earlier on you can get your folks involved in the process of putting their eyes on those systems as they go in, and stay ahead of that curve, it's going to make more sense in their minds than going in after the fact and just being able to see the bits and pieces that are sticking out.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Sounds like a good title for a class. I think you got something there. I know, Brad, you asked about live fire, and I know we've talked in Google Hangouts before about live fire training and stuff like that. I'll chime in just because we conducted an acquired structure burn. So I think I have probably the best of both worlds, or all three worlds, if you will. So in our organization, we're blessed that we have a live fire training trailer that was purchased by a neighboring department. But it's a cooperative of 5 departments that are all part of that. And so we can move that trailer around. It's a propane gas fed. We can set that up in our parking lot of our firehouse. We can run drills in it. We can do live fire, and great advantage of those propane resources is, with your doing on-duty crews like Tony talked about, and some of you dealing with a higher call volume, if you've got to do training but you got to be available, you can hit one button and the fire shuts off, the smoke shuts off, and you can take in a run. So we have that resource available to us. Our neighboring department, Lovell and Sims in Ohio, has built a beautiful Class A live fire training structure. So multiple floors, multiple burn rooms. And we go there with our mutual aid companies probably quarterly. Each of us send one company at a time, and we rotate morning, afternoon, and evening to get everybody through. So there's a lot of logistics involved, scheduling stuff, but we have that resource. But, you know, we're trying to talk a little bit about thinking outside the box today and those relationships and how you make those. So I think we can all agree that some of the best training you can have, but also some of the most dangerous training you can have, is using acquired structures. So, you know, your training building shouldn't catch on fire. They're designed not to, but your building, and when you're dealing with acquired structures, will catch on fire and create some other scenarios. So I can speak to locally. We really don't aggressively go out and look for opportunities. Most of those opportunities come to us. But I would caution anybody to jump on every opportunity that comes your way, because typically it's somebody that doesn't want to pay to demo a building, and they're looking for the fire department to fix that problem for them. And so make sure you do your due diligence to find out the background story. You know, make sure that it's, you know, your city didn't just red tag the building and order them to demolish it, and then you step in there and offer to do all this training and stuff on site and clean up the property for this person who might be in the middle of a lawsuit with your community or something like that. And then also looking at those buildings from a safety standpoint, is this a building that we can really do some great training in, but also keep our personnel safe? So we get a lot of offers, but we actually only end up doing probably 1, maybe 2 acquired structural burns a year. And it's a tremendous amount of setup time to make it safe and follow the NFPA 1403 standard. But we do it when we get the right buildings, and we build out the resources and make sure we have extra resources on site to do that training. But ISFSI, I know, has a program for live fire instructors that teaches you not only how to do the sets and the fires and stuff like that, but all the paperwork that's required, all the liability paperwork, the insurance, making sure the property's not still insured so this guy's not filing an insurance claim after the building is burned. Liability waivers to make sure if somebody falls or trips or something like that, you know, who's responsible? Is the city responsible? Is the property owner responsible? So tremendous amount of work goes into that, but I think you get some awesome training out of it as well. So that's what we do. So we kind of have the best of all three from a resource standpoint, and but don't think that the acquired structure is free, because there's a tremendous amount of man hours and labor. The last one we did just a few weeks ago, you know, part of that was taking the roof off. So, you know, July, you know, when it's 95 degrees out and 80% humidity is not the best time to be on a roof tearing off a roof so you can burn the building, but we got it done. So does anybody else still do acquired structure burns? Because I know in Aaron's neck of the woods, it's not legal. So
well,
they don't need that option.
I can tell you, we just had in my district, when I was in the out in the field, there was a community that's being torn down, and it's, you know, going to be built up with new apartments and stuff. That was a very solid buildings. I mean, we went to a lot of fires in these places, and they were solid. So they're tearing that down. I made contact with the developer, and the lady I made contact with, she was like, "You guys can do whatever you want with these buildings." So of course, you know, the guys hear that and they're like, "We can do whatever we want." Well, once it gets to us, and then we get to our legal people, now it's like, oh, we'll scale it down a little bit. So we are in the process now of trying to move towards probably doing some training in them, but not burning. I can't see that we're going to be doing live fire in the District of Columbia. But, you know, we always hold out hope, and perhaps we can do it. But just the ability to get in there and do anything is going to be a great asset.
Well, Steve, talking to that, you know, again, in Jersey, it's clear that we will never probably burn an acquired structure again. Even if the Division of Fire Safety would issue us a burn permit, which they do have the ability to do, they catch you with the DEP, so they won't issue the permit. So we've got a bad track record from 30 years ago, and it's a shame, because the firefighters of today are paying for the sins of firefighters of 30 or 40 years ago. And it's really a shame, because all we're doing is burning in concrete block buildings now And yeah, we can. This debate goes on forever as it is, but we can teach them how to do it, what to do, why they do it, but we can't teach them real reactions in a structural fire, which is a shame. I can tell you, I was involved in a burn of in a middle school down in Louisiana a couple summers ago, which that's not exactly the perfect time to do a live burn in a school, but I can tell you that through the really, really tremendous planning of a bunch of fire departments in that region and some chiefs who really got it together, and then our guys, it was wildly successful. And firefighters who really hadn't done nearly the structural firefighting that you would want them to get had a week of it. And the benefits of it were amazing. And these guys had already lined up all the insurance issues, we went and did a special meeting with the school board and the president and the superintendent of schools, the local, the parish police departments and sheriffs. And, it was all lined up, but it took a lot of work. I still believe wholeheartedly in burning in acquireds. I think you need to follow 1403. But the problem is people are afraid of it. They're just afraid of it. And if you don't have the resources to do it right, and you don't check, every box, it can be, as we know, terrible. That's huge. One other point that I wanted to remember while, as Brad was talking, it really kicked up in my mind. He talked about working with your fire prevention bureaus. That's a big deal. And having fire prevention bureaus who are actually business friendly instead of kind of business tough. We need to enforce the code, but we also need to make friends in the community. I've had that problem where we went to a place and today we'd really like to just do some walkthroughs. And I was immediately told, well, that inspector was a no good, blah, 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 and you're not coming in here until you have to. I've also been in buildings where they were, oh, yeah, you guys are the best. We love you, whatever we can do for you. Tempering what we do in inspections and doing it with a smile and doing it obviously by the book, but being nice about it can make all the difference for the suppression forces. And sometimes we need that bridge, and we don't always have that bridge. So I would remind anybody that's in inspections, hey, help us out a little bit here. But that's what Brad brought up. It's really important, because if you're not getting in these buildings prior, it's tough to know what's going on, but they will let you drill in them if you do it the right way. There's lots of places that are drilling in occupied buildings. We did it at FDIC for years, so it's out there. So that's another couple cents.
Hey, I'll chime in here in regards to the acquired structures. And before I start talking about the acquired structures part, the prevention aspect that you guys brought up so many good topics. We can probably spin this for hours and hours, but the prevention aspect, we did an officer development academy last year for our newly promoted officers. And I got to tell you, out of all the topics we covered, when the prevention guys came in and talked about prevention systems and sprinklers and standpipes and tactics and strategies, I got to tell you, that was probably one of the most appreciated and desired topics. They wouldn't let them go. They had so much knowledge that they just didn't want to let them go. They had so many questions, and they knew so much about the city, so much more than sometimes we give them credit for. So I think that for whoever's watching this, yes, if you're not talking to your prevention bureaus, if you're not intimately involved with them, you're doing something wrong, because they have a ton of knowledge, a real ton of knowledge. We have a pretty significantly successful acquired structures program in Lauderdale. And I got to tell you, it's because it's so regimented that it works. So my suggestion is, if someone out there is looking to start acquired structure training, first of all, you got to start and have a robust program. And you got to have that one person who's a safety geek. And for me, in my department, that's me. I'm that rule guy. I follow everything from 1403. I know from a distance it ain't gonna work, I won't consider it. I'm that guy that's the cop, and I'm proud of that. Like, I'm looking at one of my packets right here for one of our acquired structures. We had a warehouse that we were burning for a while, and you mentioned the work to do to get to the acquired structures. Yes, absolutely, it's a lot of work. I personally believe that the work put in to get them is always worth it. It's the best training we can offer our crews. It really is. But the work that we have to do as a bureau to go through and get signatures from the city manager, from the city attorney, from the police department, from my fire chief, going through the different agencies that allow us to burn, going through the 1403 paperwork. It is a monster. But when it's said and done, just the return on investment's just there. I don't mind doing the work. I love doing the work because the end result, it drives it, and I'm cool with that. But the relationships to make that possible between the city folk, between the city manager's office, between the housing authority, your prevention bureau, the legal department, you got to have those strong relationships to make that work. Like right now, like I said before, we've been in service for 106 years. We don't have a training facility. It's something that before I retire, I'd love to see that happen. If my new fire chief is watching this, that's what I'm working on, Chief. But one thing that we do is try to give our crews something to work with in the meantime. In other words, if we see the opportunity for a long-term site, we grab it. We actively seek these. So, for example, right now in Fort Lauderdale, we have a large 3-story property on the river that right in the heart of the city that used to house boats, that is. You can put a boat in the whole area. It's all covered up and whatnot. And we've been using that for months and months. And it's a great relationship. And we don't burn it or anything, but we can do technical rescue training in there, hose line operations, RID operations. It's serving for us. And we just got an old baseball stadium that's going to be demolished in a few months, the Fort Lauderdale Stadium, to use as acquired structures too. So now I got one in the south and one in the north. It's perfect. And one more thing I'll mention that you mentioned again goes back to contacts and seeking people out. My brother Rusty, he's a captain in Miami-Dade, and this is going back maybe 10 years ago. He was working with Bill Gusson down there. They had a great relationship, but Rusty actively sought out all the demolition companies in his area. He had a binder, a 1-inch binder thick, with all the demolition companies. He had developed this great relationship with them, and they just would call him and go, "Hey, listen, we got this house that's going down. We got this building that we're going to tear up. Do you want to come over?" And it was just this perfect relationship. But he had put the work into it to go out and do that. So it does take a lot of work, but the return on investment, the ROI, if you have a well-run program, it's really beyond. It pays for itself. So.
Some awesome points there. Brad, I think you had something you wanted to chime in about.
Yeah, just a little bit of an ADD moment, but a couple of random thoughts about a couple of different things. First of all, a couple of quick little plugs for some things that I think are relatively important to this discussion. The first, Chief Shaw mentioned about the concept of eventually building a fire service training center and stuff like that. Something, anybody else that's in that situation, something that I'll just give a quick little plug on because I'm on the technical committee for it. NFPA 1402, the Guide to Building Fire Service Training Centers, is in the process of revision over to a standard. It's going to be called the Standard for Fire Facilities and Associated Props, and it's so definitely something to keep on your radar for anybody that's looking to get involved in building a new permanent structure on their training center grounds. That NFPA 1402 that's currently going through the pipeline, but it's definitely very important for training officers to know, and anybody that's in higher level, long-term strategic planning, budgetary decision type roles in a training division is NFPA 1402. Another random, somewhat unrelated thing as it relates to, and really these my last 2 points kind of tie together. One is I want to make sure it's on everybody's radar that's tuning into the Hangout today. A quick little plug for UL and the Firefighter Safety Research Institute report that they just put out on training fidelity is what that study is. And there's a lot of good information in there about heat release rate and ventilation considerations in props and in I don't think that acquired structures was necessarily a part of that, and that may be a piece further down the line, but I know what the information they've released thus far has been related to concrete structures, but different pallet layouts and straw and arranging it in this TP fashion versus this fashion, and a lot more data than has ever been readily available to the fire service about the nitty-gritty details, the true nuts and bolts from a fire dynamic standpoint of all the different fuel packages that we use for training. So definitely something else to put on everybody's radar. And the last thing, if you're in a situation like the city of Dayton where I work, we don't burn acquired structures. And so we do all of our live fire training in-house in our 2-story concrete Class A facility. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't take some extra measures to try to make things a little bit more realistic. Aaron kind of alluded to this earlier, and we could all talk till we're blue in the face about some of the downfalls of the realism or lack thereof when it comes to live fire training. And I agree 100%, particularly when we're talking 3 pallets in the corner of a concrete burn room. However, you can do some more things, and I'll just give you one example. I just ran a 6-month recruit academy within my organization, and we built just a wood frame, of kind of an overhang, about a 4x8, overhang that was framed out with wood and carriage bolts and stuff like that, pretty thick, 4x4 structural members I think we used. And essentially what we would do is, as a crew was pushing down a hallway, we had drywall. It had a little sandwich of 2x4 grids, and we could slide some drywall in there. I'm sure that I didn't come up with the idea on my own. I'm sure I read it in some article or saw it on a webcast somewhere or something, maybe that concept. But the idea being that we would put that directly over that fire as it's really going. It would get a little bit more of a dramatic rollover effect. And then after the fire, they put that fire all the way out, right? That's one of the big things when we talk about firefighter safety, is the concept of trending away from, as us as fire instructors and training officers, trending away from that urge to have them just, a little bit of water on the fire and then that's it. Oh, we got to let it regrow so it can be ready for the next crew. And some of the downfalls of that philosophy in terms of repetitive training and that whole concept of setting our firefighters up for failure when it comes to real fires after that's all they've been exposed to in live fire training events. And so we definitely have trended at my department towards, they put the fire all the way out every single time. And to add a little bit of realism, we put that prop in there now that has some drywall. And so they put the fire completely out. They overhaul the room with pike poles and everything like that, pull all the ceiling down, scoop the room out for overhaul, run the fans and everything. And so we get a fewer evolutions done in a day, but by essentially giving every recruit their own full room and contents fire from beginning to end, we're trying to create that muscle memory of a little bit more realism and trend away from that, squirt, squirt, squirt. Okay, now everybody rotate kind of thing. Okay, now you give me a T. Okay, good job. Now you give me a Z. Okay, good job, right? And just rotate around. And where that falls short in terms of actual realism. So anyway, you can bring some more realism, as provided you're within the confines of 1403 in terms of fuel packages and things like that. You can bring some of that realism into your Class A fixed facility building.
So those are some awesome points. I really wish you would yeah, I drew a blank there. So in talking to Brad and listening to Brad,
what were you gonna say? Were you gonna say shut up?
No, I was gonna say that your passion is apparent. Let's just put it that way. So on the sidebar, Aaron and I were
real quick.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony.
We did just that in our burn building, our concrete burn building. Some of the instructors we had went out, looked at some of our neighbors, specifically like Fairfax, and saw how they were able to get their burn building to really kind of replicate more of that ventilation limited fires that we're seeing on the real fire ground. They brought that back. They actually built some walls and made our big room in the burn buildings a little bit smaller, and they were able to get that. Unfortunately, there's a cost with that, right? Every time you have a burn, a week of recruit burns. So I think that kind of caught the eye of some of our leadership, and if we can our burn building, so we can do that, because you're right. I mean, the concrete burn building isn't really replicating what we're seeing out on the fire ground. So we got to do something to do that, and we have a way. We're going to have to, make a more long-term investment, so we don't have those recurring costs that we might with building smaller rooms in our concrete burn building. So we'll see.
So all of you have brought up facts that you guys at different points in times, you build stuff, right? You adapt, whether it be your concrete training building or buildings that you have donated to you. or vehicles or whatever. I know, Aaron, you've had a lot of work with building props, and I think that's a real important message for this Hump Day Hangout is if you don't have a training facility, you don't have a training building, you can't use acquired structures, you can still build stuff, right? You can build your own training building. Department near us has 4 telephone poles put in their parking lot, and they build platforms, and it's a training building. But can you elaborate on that a little bit, Aaron?
Sure. There's so many examples out there today. I can tell you the good and the bad. When we go training places and you go out in the middle of some places and there's just nothing, it's, hey, we've got this parking lot, but we want to do truck stuff, or we want to do this or that. It does take being creative. Even at FDIC, we've been short on things at times where we just ran out of supplies, and we got creative with pallets, or we got creative with some steel. One of the things, I'll start in the firehouse. It's like, looking at your own crews to start out. Utilize the guys who have those skills as craftsmen. The one thing that the fire departments across the country had forever was we were hands-on guys. We had craftsmen. We had metal workers and welders and carpenters and plumbers and electricians. And although everybody says the new generation we don't have that, that's a bunch of BS, because it's still out there. It may be not as prevalent as it once was, but it is. If you've got a guy who's a good welder, you can do some great things, building some cutting props, building a door of your own, forcible entry door. Maybe you can't afford a $7,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 prop, but the welder can go and he can grab some supplies from a local supply house, make you something, and do it for a few $100 or whatever the budget might be. So I'm blessed. I've got a guy in my firehouse who's a great welder. Our chief saw the positive in that, and in one of his budgets put a nice MIG welder in the budget, and we have it in the firehouse. So Sean's been able to build a lot of stuff. When we went to Vermont and just did this truck class a few weeks ago, they had a guy in there who was a carpenter. This kid banged out a roof prop when I sent him the pictures and the dimensions. And this thing, I don't know, I think it would probably survive an earthquake. It was so good. So utilizing those people that are willing to do it with you, and you find the guys, they have the passion for training, and they will build props, and they're digging it. So that's a big part of it. As far as getting some of these supplies, if you go to your local big box store, places like Lowe's and Home Depot, or even your local Ace Hardware store, or whatever it may be, they get a lot of damaged wood, damaged sheetrock, things like that. That's perfect for us. We're just going to destroy it anyway. We can scab it together and we can make it work. So we've had a lot of luck doing that, asking them, hey, can you just throw the scraps to the side for us, and we'll come in and grab it for you. Or even going to contractors who are building new developments in your community, and listen, you got damaged wood or damaged rock or whatever, set it aside and let us know, and we'll come out with a pickup or a trailer and grab some stuff. So those have been big. And I can tell you the bad of it. And my guys, I'm getting texts from some of my guys that teach with me. We used to do a big weekend burn up in Reading, Pennsylvania, and one of the guys that was teaching roof ops for me said, hey, I want to build this prop on the roof, and I can do this. And like an ass, I handed him my credit card and said, okay, do what you have to do. And I lost more money on that damn roof prop than ever. So you have to be cautious of how you do it. We didn't need to do it with the best lumber that Home Depot could possibly sell us, and the most of it. But the other thing, talking about modifying the burn buildings, what's a good example? We've used this little burn building that is like not necessarily what I would want to use, and it's up on the coast in Maine. And to make it more realistic and to do some things, we put our burglar bar prop in the burn room window, and we made sure that when we arced the fire up in there, we put some tin over the fire so it would shoot it out that window. Well, now the guys are making cuts under live fire conditions, and it changes the dynamic. Make them cut from a ladder. It changes the dynamic, because not everything is perfectly nice and pristine like we get at the training ground. So those little things can and not only does it add some realism, but it keeps the guys on their toes, and it makes our crews want to do more training, because it's got that little flair of something different, just not that same old stuff. And you make the props to the way they're going to find things in your community. I don't teach my guys tenement work, because we're not going to 6-story tenements like they have in the Bronx. I'm teaching them, you know, what we have where we go. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. So that's what I got.
So, Aaron, while you were talking about that, I actually posted to Twitter and to the hashtag FD Talk a picture of a prop. So we were doing a training 3-day engine company class. Basically starting at the truck, everything from water supply, getting a draft, or from a hydrant to pulling lines, and then we advanced to bigger lines, longer lines, harder stretches, and stuff like that. Great opportunity, hands-on training that we did. But we were playing with the idea of changing our hose loads. And changing your hose load on an actual pumper, especially when you're dealing with a rescue engine that's got a lot of compartmentation, and a lot of us get frustrated at how high our crosslays are, can be a pain. So real quick, a couple of guys ran out, and Nick Martin, who teaches for Traditions Training, was there with us. And they bought some lumber real quick at the hardware store, came back, and they built a prop, perfect dimensions to our crosslays, but built it so it was portable. So you could stick it on a table, you could stick it on the ground. We put it on a picnic bench. And now you're doing it right at your waist level. And we were able to repack, pack, pull, repack and pull multiple different lines, different configurations, and play around with what we really wanted to do much easier, and then move to the truck. And I just think I thought of that. And so I did post it to Twitter, the pictures there, but it's just one of those outside of the box things I never thought of before. And Nick says, hey, let's just build one real quick. And 20 minutes later, we had a prop that we now have forever, which is an exact dimensions of our crosslays on our truck. I've even seen departments when they're planning out a new truck, building a replica of their truck and the compartments with cardboard boxes to lay out a truck and decide how they're going to put their equipment and where they're going to mount equipment and stuff like that. So again, it's a prop, right? But I think that the real message there is we've got some great resources, not only in our community that we've talked about today, but in the firehouse with our staff and what people do on their days off, who their friends are, what family members do. You know, we all have a friend that's in a trade that can bring something to the firehouse that may be junk, and I think a lot of it is, but you know, getting that stuff that's otherwise going to end up in a landfill or in a dumpster, bring it in the firehouse and let the guys cut on it, burn it, drill with it, whatever the case may be. So we're already at the top of the hour almost, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to chime in a little bit more on this topic before we wrap up today's hump day. So who would like to go first?
I wouldn't mind. I'll go ahead and start if you guys are okay with it. I would say that the one thing I would like to leave people who are watching this episode is you'll never know unless you ask. You'll never know unless you ask. And I think you'll be surprised. I think people out there will be surprised if they just ask what they can get involved with, what kind of resources are out there, or even being known as the guy who's seeking resources. If someone knows they have something pops up, oh yeah, that guy was looking for impact class, let me reach out to him. So if I can leave anybody who's watching this with anything, is you'll never know unless you ask.
I can go real quick, Chief. So I'm kind of having just various random thoughts today, so I'll finish with a couple of various random thoughts. One, when it comes to acquiring structures within your community, particularly not just necessarily single-family dwellings, but larger structures within your community. If you're full-time assigned to a training division, something else that's good to keep on your radar is to be subscribed to various local business media resources. Like in Dayton, we have the Dayton Business Journal, and we have a business section subdivision of the Dayton Daily News and stuff like that. And making sure that when you're at training, you're subscribed to what's going on in the business community, so that way if you see a closure that's been announced, or a tenant that's a big tenant move that's happening, or a building that's for sale, or a building that's going to be demolished, sometimes you can get ahead of the curve even further than those demolition contractors contacting you. And so anyway, just keep an eye on the business community from the training office to see what's going on in the community, and maybe proactively seek out some of those kinds of things ahead of time. You see they're tearing this building down to build a new hotel or something like that. Well, before you hear from the demolition contractors, go down to that site and start talking to people and hitting them up about what that timeline is going to be. And last but not least, a quick little safety blip. A friend of mine, his name's OJ Kloje from Birmingham Fire, was posting something on social media and sharing it on various channels. He's a well-respected fire instructor, teaches a lot. Had a health scare as it related to fake smoke, candy smoke that they were using, and that was something that was traveling around. And the reason I bring it up here is he was freely sharing the information, so I'll share it here as well. He had some significant health problems related to apparently an overexposure of that fake smoke. So, well, we all know that's absolutely a very good resource for a lot of the different things that we've been talking about today. When it comes to that theatrical smoke, at least have it on your radar as a training officer that overexposure to that stuff can be a bad thing. That's all. Have a good day.
Hey guys, I'll take a turn now. Steve, this is a good topic. I appreciate you coming up with a topic we can all talk about. This is kind of flies in the face of me being at the training office, in the training division at the academy. But some of the best training we can do, we all know, is company level based training. And again, from my job, the ability to get down to the academy might be firehouse. These are the best things we can do because you're local, you're close, you're with your crew. Come down here to the academy. It's going to be a institutionalized drill, if you will. But we can use those. We can use some handyman to build props here as well. But I really think that you get the local drill, the local company, the local area. You're going to get a lot more out of it. Again, you work with your crews in your area, and you don't have to get pulled away, and you're ready for a response in your area. So, again, Steve, thanks for a good topic. Hopefully, we'll see you guys next month.
Aaron, any parting shout out?
No, I think we've covered so much. There's just a couple things. This week is, if I'm not mistaken, the 40th anniversary of the Waldbaum's fire. So anybody gets a chance, I know Billy G sent out an email, with all the links about that. That's really a good training point for your guys just in the firehouse. So that's a good drill. And I know that down in Osceola, Florida right now, they're doing the Mickelbeg training that they do every year in honor of those two firefighters that were killed in the line of duty. And I think today is Chief Salka presenting. Yesterday was Steve Robertson. And I think tomorrow they've got Stevie Gillespie. So, we just keep those guys in our thoughts and in our prayers. And I really appreciate the chance. We got back to it on a great topic. And September should be just as good.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for your input. I thought it was a great topic, and obviously we could go on and on. But we are at the top of the hour and probably all have things to get back to. So I think the highlight of all this is building relationships, right? Whether it be within the department, with your fire prevention bureau, with your building code officials, with property owners, with tow companies, with junkyards, is build those relationships early and often. You'll find out through a period of time that actually they may not realize it, but you can help them. Local company by us that ended up with a bunch of junk cars they couldn't get rid of. They came to us and said, how do we get rid of these cars? And if you cut them in half, apparently they can junk them. So we went in and we cut a bunch of cars in half for them. But we got a lot of really good training that we normally wouldn't have done through the process. So work on those relationships and be creative and beg, borrow, and steal other people's ideas. And if you don't have it, build it, because all of us know there's a lot of great resources in the fire department. Final reminder, we're out here in Tulsa right now picking classes for FDIC. FDIC is a little bit early this year, April 8th through the 13th, 2019. Register early. The hot classes fill up very fast. If you wait until February or March to register for hot programs, you're probably not going to get the classes that you want. And then also, again, the Instructor Development Conference hosted by the International Society of Fire Service Instructors outside Chicago, September 24th through the 29th. Check out isfsi.org for more information. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next month.